Ladies and gentlemen, dear Presidium, dear guests, I would like to open the opening meeting of the Egon and Diczfalusy Foundation now. Let me introduce the Presidium first. His Excellency, Mr. Piamsak Militancinda, the Royal Thai Ambassador to Hungary. Warm welcome. Professor György Benedek, the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine, University of Szeged. Thank you. Professor Britt Maria Landgren, who is here on behalf of the President of the Karolinska Institute, Stockholm. Professor Giovanni Scambia, representative of the Faculty of Medicine, Catholic University of the Sacred Heart, Rome, Italy. And special request and special respect to Professor Egon Diczfalusy, the founder. Professor Attila Pál, the president of the Diczfalusy Foundation of Szeged, the head of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology Clinics, and president of the Albert Szent-Györgyi Clinical Center, University of Szeged. Professor Giuseppe Benagiano, vice president of the Diczfalusy Foundation, Geneva. And last but not least, Professor György Bátfai, Vice President of the Diczfalusy Foundation, Szeged. Thank you very much. And now I would like to express the apologies of the invited guests who are not able to attend this special meeting. First of all, Anna Glazier, National Health Service, Lot and Family Planning Program, Edinburgh, United Kingdom. Professor Regina Stakvar, Rockefeller University and Population Council, New York, the USA. Professor Gyula Telegdi, Szeged branch of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, Szeged, Hungary. Dr. Erik Boks, Managing Director of the Richter-Gedeon Pharmaceutical Company. Professor Tom Ristürman, World Health Organization, Geneva, Switzerland. Professor Ruggero de Maria, Department of Hematology, Oncology and Molecular Medicine, Institute Superior di Sanità, Rome, Italy. And finally, Professor Antonio Lanzone, the Catholic University of the Sacred Heart Medicine, University, Rome, Italy. Thank you very much. And now, I would like to ask Professor Giovanni Scambia to read the letter of the Italian ambassador to Hungary.
This is a letter from the Italian ambassador in Hungary to Professor Mancuso and Professor Diczfalusy. I am translating it from the Italian. I have acknowledged with great pleasure about the important achievement you are going to receive on September 18 in Szeged. Unfortunately, due to previous appointments, I will not be able to take part. However, I wish you the best and congratulate for your personal success and the scientific importance of the premium. It is a great favor for our. It is a great honor for our country, Italy, that an Italian scientist will be the first to be awarded by this achievement from the Diczfalusy Foundation, once again to testify the excellence reached by Italy in the field of medicine. I wish that this occasion will be the beginning of a future strong collaboration between the two institutions.
Now I would like to read the letter of Peter Petrus, who is the former president of the Hungarian Medical Association of America. Dear Professor Bartfai, Vice President of the Diczfalusy Foundation, thank you very much for your kind invitation to the founding meeting of the Egon and N. Diczfalusy Foundation. I deeply regret that due to my obligations at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, I cannot be present on this festive occasion to honor the unique scientific and humanitarian contributions of Egon Diczfalusy and to the launch to the Egon and N. Diczfalusy Foundation for supporting research in reproductive health. As one of the graduates of the legendary Diczfalusy Laboratory and as former president of the Hungarian Medical Association of America, I'm sending my warmest greetings to all participants of the founding meeting of the Egon and N. Diczfalusy Foundation, and personally to Professor Diczfalusy. Dear Egon, my wife Sophie joins me in sending you your heartfelt congratulations and best wishes for continued success and good health for the future. Peter Petrus. And last but not least, I would like to read a short letter. This letter is from Professor Miguel Oliveira da Silva, the director of the Reprostat study and professor in the Institute of Preventive Medicine, University of Lisboa, Portugal. Dear Professor Egon Diczfalusy, I'm deeply sorry to have to inform you that for absolutely unpredictable health reasons, I'm not allowed to travel during the next days. For this reason, I will not be able to attend your challenging and important program, the historical Diczfalusy Foundation meeting. I ask you to understand this very sad situation and would like to congratulate to you to establish such an outstanding foundation in which work I would be extremely honored to participate. Kind regards, Professor Miguel Oliveira da Silva. Thank you very much. And now I would like to ask Professor Giovanni Scambia and Professor György Benedek to take their seat in the special table, and it takes a few minutes. Please do that. And now I would like to ask His Excellency Mr. Piamsak Militacinta, the Royal Thai Ambassador to Hungary, to come here and to have his short speech. Thank you very much.
Professor Egon Diczfalusy, Professor Attila Paul, the President of the Board of Trustees of Egon and Anne Diczfalusy Foundation, member of the Board of Trustees, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for me as the representative of the Prince Mahidol Award Foundation of Thailand to be here among the world's great scholars and scientists at the opening meeting of Egon and Anne Diczfalusy Foundation. On behalf of the Prince Mahidol Award Foundation of Thailand, I would like to congratulate Professor Egon Diczfalusy, as well as all of their colleagues and the people of Hungary, for this recently established Hungarian foundation, humanitarian foundation dedicated to supporting scientific works in the field of improving productive health. And it is my great pleasure to note that Professor Egon Diczfalusy was the recipient of the Prince Mahidol Award in the field of medicine for the year 1995. The award was bestowed upon him for his teaching and research works in human reproductive health, contributing to the enrichment of the lives of millions of people all over the world, especially in developing countries. Professor Diczfalusy has dedicated his life and career to training young scientists, producing groundbreaking scientific books and papers, conducting seminars and workshops as well as scientific meetings, and providing advice to key policy makers and medical officers. His long life dedication has produced meaningful and profound results for the past, present, and I'm sure for the future benefits of mankind. The Egon and Anne Diczfalusy Foundation is the latest remarkable accomplishment from an extraordinary couple. This foundation, which Professor Diczfalusy and Mrs. Anne have contributed much of their time and resources, I am certain, will benefit not only the people of Hungary, but also of the world. Professor, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to express my sincere admiration for Professor Diczfalusy and his charitable deeds. The prize money he received from the Prince Mahidol Award Foundation was donated as seed money for the foundation of Egon and Anne Diczfalusy Foundation. And on behalf of the Prince Mahidol Award Foundation, I applaud him for such a selfless act. There's no doubt that the world today has inherited numerous problems from the past indiscretions and indulgences. They are not only from conflict of ideas, but also from environmental and health-related challenges, to name a few. Scientific and technological progress has brought about development and advancement to the world. Yet, it can also cause unimaginable destruction. A sobering reality is that due to the globalization, a disease outbreak in one location can potentially spread throughout the world in very little time. The Egon and Anne Diczfalusy Foundation is thus a timely response to the challenges from the negative side of the modern world. The foundation will provide resources, knowledge, and above all, opportunities to scholars and scientists whose utmost desire is to make contributions for the betterment of the world. Professor, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Prince Mahidol Award Foundation of Thailand, I would like to take this opportunity to wish Professor and his foundation great success and continued progress in the path that they have taken so unselfishly for the well-being of mankind. And I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, I would like to start the opening session now, and I would like to give the word to Professor Attila Pál, President of the Diczfalusy Foundation, Szeged. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, there is a popular Chinese chorus saying that may you live in interesting times, and few of us would disagree that we are living in very interesting times. Almost 200 years ago, Waldo Emerson wrote that these times of ours are serious and full of calamity, but all times are essentially alike. However, I beg to defer to him, since I am convinced that our time is fundamentally different from all other times because of, as Professor Diczfalusy wrote in 1984, the changes around us are increasing in magnitude and speed, but our perception of these changes and of their likely consequences lagging more and more behind. Our generation has seen more progress in medicine than all medical science in all preceding periods together since the dawn of history, and most drugs used today by hundreds of millions of our fellow and women have been developed in our lifetime, and many more are in the coming. Indeed, without medical research, life would be a mistake. In fact, our knowledge expands in a logarithmic fashion, and today the amount of new information is said to double every 7th year. It is not easy for an ordinary citizen to grasp the consequence of this. Many of us profoundly convinced that acquisition, critical evaluation, systematization, dissemination of positive knowledge are the only human activities which are truly cumulative and progressive, and that the fruits of this new knowledge should be made available to the entire human race without discrimination whatsoever. Anton Chekhov perceived this sum about 100 years ago by saying that egyel visszább legyen szíves. Még visszafele legyen szíves. Még vissza. Akkor következően ez volt az első. Még egyel tovább. Még egyel tovább. Még egyel tovább. Igen, köszönöm szépen. So, Anton Chekhov wrote it. There is no national science, just as there is no national multiplication table. What is national is no longer science. It would appear that even in our time, the political and religious leadership of many countries fail to perceive these rather elementary truths. 20 years ago, the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm established the Egon Diczfalusy Lecture Award that is given yearly to eminent scientists, and we here in Szeged felt that the time has come and to establish the first truly international foundation at our university, the Egon and N. Diczfalusy Foundation for supporting research and human reproduction. In fact, a few months ago, the constitution of our foundation was approved by the appropriate legal authorities. The international group of highly respected scientists agreed to serve the board of trustees. They are the next, please. Professor Giuseppe Benaggiano from Switzerland as a vice president, Professor György Bárfrey from Szeged as a vice president, Professor György Benedek as the dean of Szeged University, the Herjan Köling-Benning from Netherlands. Next one, please. The Professor Christina Gemzel-Danielsson from Stockholm, Professor Anna Kleiser from Edinburgh, Professor Ursula Habenicht from Berlin, Professor Márta Katona from Szeged, Professor Salvatore Mancuso from Rome, Professor Regine Citruk-Vár from New York, Günther Stock from Berlin, Professor Gyula Telegdi from Szeged, Dr. György Thaler from Budapest, Professor Tomris Türmen from Ankara, and Dr. Marissa Benaggiano Romagnoli from Rome as a Honorary Secretary General, and in addition me as Attila Pál from Szeged. We will have our first board meeting tomorrow to discuss the selection of the chairperson and members of our international advisory committees, each with some 25 members. It will be the International Scientific Advisory Committee and International Policy Coordinating Committee. Of course, anyone can establish research foundation with plenty of money. We had many fresh ideas what to do and how. We enjoyed strong moral support from the university and from literary giant like G.B. Shaw, who reminded us that the problems of this world cannot be solved by cynics and skeptics whose vision is blurred by obvious realities. We need men and women who ask, why not? And start doing it. And we start doing it after all we felt that we had all the prerequisites except money. And with this begins the saga of Mission Impossible. In his drama Heracles, Euripides emphasizes that whoever prefers wealth or might to the possession of good friends thinks amiss. And we knew that Professor Diczfalusy had an unusually large number of research students and friends in many corners of the world. So we have sent a circular letter to them announcing the creation of the foundation dedicated to maintaining the legacy of Professor Diczfalusy and his wife Anne. In creating the foundation, his former students in his alma mater, the University of Szeged, hope to achieve a number of objectives. Ez nem jó. Bocsánat, még egyszer legyen szíves visszajátszani? De jó. Support the training of physicians and health professionals and assist them in attending conferences in Hungary and abroad. Launch new research programs aiming to improve reproductive health. Support the international exchange of scientists. Organize scientific conferences and congresses. Promote and support informative lectures and publications. Organize annually the Diczfalusy Scientific Meeting. At these yearly meetings, present the Diczfalusy Medal and Diczfalusy Award. In the circular letter mentioned above, we have also asked friends to former students to financially contribute to the establishment of the trust fund with which the foundation will begin to operate, and subsequently we have received contributions for their children and even grandchildren, research students and their families from many friends living in different countries, and of course from a few pharmaceutical companies in Hungary and abroad. Hence Euripides was right again when he pointed out his Heracles that, I repeat it, whoever prefers wealth or might to the possession of good friends thinks amiss. However, it wouldn't have been possible to organize the present meeting with the handing over the Diczfalusy Medal and Diczfalusy Prize without special contribution of the founder who, with the approval and strong support of the Prince Mahidol Award Foundation in Bangkok, Thailand, transferred to our foundation his Prince Mahidol Award, which he received in 1996 from the hands of Her Royal Highness Crown Princess Mahi Shari Shirandhorn. I find a strong symbolic significance behind this act, since This may well be one of the first occasions when a monetary award received by a developed country science from a developing country foundation will be used for strengthening the resource of the new foundation situated in a so-called developed countries. Therefore, I would like to ask His Excellency, the Royal Thai Ambassador to Hungary, to convey our indebtedness and heartfelt thanks to Professor Supat Vanichkar, Secretary General of the Prince Mahidol Award Foundation. This support, together with the voluntary contribution from family members, friends and former students, enable us to organize the present meeting, but it will not be sufficient to provide support to research and training in the years to come, as previously outlined the aims and objectives of the foundations. Hence, one of the immediate tasks of the board trustees will be to raise enough financial support during the years to come to enable us to achieve our long-term objectives. Finally, if I am permitted to look back a couple of thousand years into the history of science, I find that it was always considered as an important instrument called in antiquity ancilla. Originally, it was called as an ancilla theologiae to provide so-called scientific arguments for solving theological disputes. Since the dawn of history, it has also constantly been used to develop more and more efficacious weapons, ancilla belli. If you look around in our so-called modern world today, one can hardly escape the conclusion that science today frequently serves as ancilla pecuniae, a powerful money-making instrument. However, the only proper use of science must be and should be to serve as ancilla humanitatis, an instrument used in order to improve a human condition. It is our firm belief and hope that in the years to come this foundation will be able to significantly threaten the role of medical science to become an ancilla humanitatis of overwhelming importance. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give the word now to Professor György Bártfai, the Vice President of the Diczfalusy Foundation, Szeged.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, it is a very pleasant task for me to briefly introduce the Diczfalusy Prize to you. According to the statutes of the Foundation, this prize will be given annually to an internationally acknowledged investigator internationally acknowledged investigator in the field of research on reproductive health to acknowledge her or his lifetime scientific achievement. The initial idea was to design a silver medal which will remind the awardees of the Diczfalusys and of this foundation with its effort to contribute to the improvement of human reproductive health. Therefore, we have approached Sándor Krigl, a well-known sculptor in Szeged, to design a medal which would meet the expectation of the founder and express his thought about medical research and humanity. At the same time, the founder wished to convey to the awardees a take-home message about the importance of medicine and its ethics and humanitarianism for the evolution of science and scientists. Sándor Kligl artistic career was started in the early 1970s. Since that time, he received 18 major exhibition awards. He is the recipient of many grants and special awards. For example, the Pro Szeged Medallion in 2006. His artwork and particular talent is well recognized all over Hungary and in many European countries. To briefly characterize his unique approach, I would like to project two of his creations. The citizens of Szeged love his playful and cheerful figures walking on the main shopping street of Szeged, the Kárán Street. You will see one of his loved artwork, Street Music. Another rather famous artwork of Kligl is the sculpture St. Stephen and Giselle. Next. Sándor Kligl is a brilliant medal maker also, I am sure. You will be convinced about this after having seen the Diczfalusy medal. On one side of the medal depicts a lovely mother with her child. The three words, empathy, science, hope, represents Professor Diczfalusy's life motto, well known to his students. And I am sure, ladies and gentlemen, that you will intellectual background, you don't need any further explanation of the significance of these three words. On the other side of the medal, one can observe one of the symbols of Szeged, the Dome Square, with the votive church. The Microbiological Institute of the university where Professor Diczfalusy's scientific career started is situated in this building. Medicina ancora salutis. Medicine is the anchor of salvation is a frequently quoted phrase from him. You may know that in the old Latin usage, medicine also meant medical research. We wish his former research student felt that this is a very important message, not only to us and to all present and future Diczfalusy awardees, but also to all contemporary scientists and its political leadership. In our view, the artist succeeded very well in emphasizing the importance of these phrases for the conduct of our professional life. Thank you for your kind attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next task is the laudatio of the awardee of the foundation. Please, Professor Giuseppe Benediano, Vice President of the Foundation, Geneva, Switzerland, come here.
Dear Egon, dear friends, I have the pleasure, even more than the honor, of very briefly tell you about the life and the achievements of Professor Salvatore Mancuso, whom we all call Ninni Mancuso, whom I met something like 44 years ago, when we both were young, very young, and followed over almost half a century. Ninni Mancuso was born in Palermo, in Sicily, where he graduated from the medical school. He then moved to the north, to Turin, for his specialist degree. And he started working in the lab. And once he told me that he was trying desperately to set up the urinary estrogen method of Professor Jim Brown, and failed. And he said, because I was messy and I didn't distill the solvents. So he needed a teacher. He needed somebody who could help him. And as fate wanted, he went to the first International Congress on Hormonal Steroids, set up by Luciano Martini in Milan in 1962. And there, he bluntly went up to a young Egon Diczfalusy and said, could I come to your lab for a few months just to begin learning? And obviously, Diczfalusy said yes. Ninni Mancuso had a small grant from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he went up. And he started working, and then fate intervened once again, because in 1963, the Ford Foundation granted Egon Diczfalusy one of the largest, at least for those days, grants ever in reproductive medicine. Egon received $500,000 of 1963. And so he was able to get a number of researchers in his lab and paid from the Ford Foundation. So not only Ninni Mancuso stayed and stayed until 1967, but others like me joined. And this was an unforgettable period. Hard work, but also a lot of results, exciting results for us. And we were so excited that I remember once I went to see an American friend who was there just for a year of sabbatical, who was much senior to us. And so I said, you know, we found that in the lungs the steroids are reduced onto alpha, and in the liver onto beta. And the guy looked at me and said, and so what? So it's not always cheerful when you talk to the more senior people. However, this did not deter us. And we went on and we published a number of papers, and the first meeting that together Ninni Mancuso and I attended was in 1965 in Venice. It was a Ford Foundation conference on reproductive physiology. And I remember that we were given 15 minutes. And then somebody said, no, that's not enough, 12 minutes. And so we went to Egon and said, but we can't speak in 12 minutes. And he said, oh, yes, you can. Here is this slide goes out, this other slide goes out. And so we spoke for 12 minutes. Then there was the other episode at the Acta Endocrinologica Congress, where he said, you have to speak, but you will not be allowed to read. So the first of us who had the meeting, who had to speak, was an Italian, Sergio Dell'Acqua, and he went and he spoke without reading, with the best English he could muster. And then he went very satisfied to see Egon and say, was that okay? And Egon looked at him and said, if you don't improve your English, you are never going to speak again. So the next one was Ninni Mancuso, who I still remembering was walking up and down in this small hall, and at one point he lost himself. and he was there for some 15 long seconds, unable to keep going until he put himself together and finished. And all I can say is that I learned from the other two. I put in a very small piece of paper my speech in my pocket, and reassured by the fact that I could get it out rather than stop for 15 or 20 seconds, I went on. Then in 1967, the medical school of the Catholic University of Italy, which is in Milan, was founded in Rome. And the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology was given to Professor Adriano Bompiani. And he called Mancuso and said, do you want to come and help me building this new department? And so another phase of Nindi Mancuso's life began in Rome, to set up a lab, to set up clinical research, and to do clinical work. He told me, you remember, in those days, being a lab guy was not something that the clinicians considered important. But he built in his own institution a different approach to clinical research, and an approach that was good enough for him to be named, we say incaricato, which is an adjunct professor in northern Sardinia. In those days in Italy, in order to become a full professor, you had to go around from the smaller places to the larger ones. And so he went to this small city of Sassari in northern Sardinia. And then he was appointed full professor and moved south, in Sardinia though, to Cagliari, the capital of Sardinia. And he was there for a number of years, not always easy, not always smooth, until the time came for moving back to the Catholic University in Rome. That also was not easy because the chairman, Professor Bompiani, in the meantime had become a senator and the Minister of Social Affairs. So he was on leave, but he was only too aware of the fact that in politics, let alone in Italian politics, you have a big job one day and the next day you have nothing. So he didn't want to relinquish his chairmanship. But some friends intervened and eventually he gave up and Nindi Mancuso became the chairman in Rome. And those were, again, difficult years, a number of issues. Somebody accused him of being an abortist. And thank God that the Catholic University, they are not very progressive in this field. They realized that in Sweden, Nini, or to that matter, any of us, ever touched a woman. There was no European Union. The degree in medicine in Italy was not recognized in Sweden, so we were purely in the lab. But again, somebody tried to smear him and fortunately failed, completely failed. And during this period, Nini had a number of important international assignments. He was in WHO's task forces. He, at one point, was asked to go to Armenia. Armenia had just been devastated by an earthquake, being a poor country to start with, a country that had just come out of the former Soviet Union. And there they helped creating a new medical school, rebuilding what little was left after the earthquake, and train people. And for that work, the rector of the university gave him a degree honoris causa in medicine there in Armenia. Well, I've come to the very brief outline of his life and his achievements. And the last thing is the life after retirement, because we all need to find out that there is life after retirement. And he retired last March and was given the task of president of the ethics committee of the Catholic University. Again, as you can imagine, not an easy task, being not only in a Catholic university, but in Rome. And he went on to work, again with great enthusiasm, the same enthusiasm that I have seen in him from the very early days when he was a newly married guy in Stockholm, and I was still a bachelor, longing for spaghetti. And Franca, his wife, would call me once in a while and say, "Come, and I will make you a dish of spaghetti al sugo." So you see, I tried to give you an image of a man, of a humanitarian, and of a scientist, because Ninni Mancuso is all these three things. And I am extremely pleased that the first medal goes to him, Egon's oldest student, oldest pupil, from the very beginning of his own international career. Thank you very much.
Please, Professor Salvatore Mancuso Avardi, come here and deliver your honorary speech. Thank you.
Authorities, distinguished colleagues and guests, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends, it is a great emotion for me to present this lecture and to receive such a prestigious award, the first one since the Egon and Anne Diczfalusy Foundation has been established. It was exactly 45 years ago when I completed my training in obstetrics and gynecology at the School of Medicine at the University of Turin that I wanted to study in depth the prenatal life, especially the field of steroid production and excretion during pregnancy. At that time, the intrauterine environment was rather mysterious and still unexplored, and the only certainty on the endocrinology of pregnancy was the huge amount of estrogens and pregnenolone in the urine of pregnant women at term. The relationship between mother and fetus was in general considered a kind of a one-way street, where all the resources and benefits were moving into the direction of the fetus, considered a sort of a parasite who received all the biological benefits and advantages at the expense of the maternal organism. The uterus was considered a kind of our first home for the period of the 40 weeks of gestation, and the vision of this organ was not much different with respect to the imagination of the Etruscans, that in the 3rd century BC, they represented the uterus in this shape with its muscular wall and a very large cervix. The events of our life are programmed by chance or perhaps by a heavenly intervention. And thus, while attending the first international meeting on hormonal steroids in Milano, I had the fortune to listen to the lecture of Professor Diczfalusy on estrogen biosynthesis in pregnancy. He was very kind to me after his presentation when I asked him to join his group in Stockholm for a brief stay in the lab to learn the methodology for measuring the urinary estrogens. I arrived in Stockholm in October '62 with the idea to stay for about 3 months. But at the beginning of '63, the professor received a very consistent grant from the Ford Foundation for a period of 5 years, and part of it was destined to fellowships for young research workers. I was then the first recipient and became a Ford Foundation Fellow for the entire period of 5 years. This picture was taken late in the night by the Dagens Nyheter journalists and published the day after in that newspaper with the interview to the professor, praised to have obtained such a prestigious grant from the United States. During those years, Franca and I got married, and shortly after, Alessandra and Giuliana came to cheer up the family. Filippo came 5 years later in Rome. We both conducted our research work in the lab, and in the meantime, besides the scientific accomplishments, a solid friendship started with the professor and with the colleagues in the lab, especially the Italian ones. This is one of the favorite pictures that can be almost considered the logo of the hormone laboratory. It represents the pharaoh procession with the banners of the royal power, and among this, his own placenta takes the first place, meaning how important was at that time, 5,000 years ago, the role of this organ in shaping the divine personality of the king. During those 5 years, there was a very intensive activity and great excitement in planning research, designs, and experimental conditions. There was a great deal of work to be done, and each group was divided into subgroups to study different aspects of the steroid metabolism in the different compartments, and with different methodologies that, if one compared them with the most recent ones, looked very primitive, although extremely accurate and controlled. All of us presented each other with the results obtained, and at all time there was a great spirit of collaboration, exchange of new ideas, and applied with the purpose of improving the technique and enriching the information on the distribution of the steroid precursors and the production of the different metabolites, both in the fetus and the placenta. And since each piece of data was an entirely new goal, the group could not hide the excitement and the fulfillment. With the spirit in the lab, one day we received a visit of the Italian television team. When the King of Sweden, Gustav Adolf, went to Italy for a state visit in 1966, the Italian Foreign Office wanted to emphasize the Swedish-Italian friendship with a series of interviews to people from the countries collaborating in different aspects of human activities, including scientific research. In the short film that has finished, fragments of that recording, we explained to the Italians what we were doing in Sweden, the purpose of our research, and the reason why we moved to Stockholm to learn and to develop our projects, and why they could not be done at home. The professor also explained how difficult it was to obtain sufficient funds in Italy and in some European countries to conduct that particular kind of research that we were running in Stockholm. So in our work, the placenta was at the focus of our scientific interest. Here the cartoon shows how Michelangelo, in the fresco of the Sistine Chapel ceiling, imaginated the creation of man by God who is here symbolized in form of a big placenta, with the arms of both the Adam and his creator being the umbilical cord. And the placenta is indeed the architect that greatly contributes to build up our body and our mind, the future of our physical well-being and our behavioral attitudes. As the recent researches in molecular genetics through the genomic imprinting prove it more and more every day. This slide summarizes all the theory of the fetoplacental steroidogenesis, and it is quite clear how the placenta can synthesize separately C21, C19, and C18 steroids from the precursors coming from the maternal and from the fetal compartments. In the fetus, there is no formation of delta-4 steroids, and the capacity to aromatize androgens is not present except in a very limited amount, since the placenta provides most of these enzymatic activities. In addition, the fetus can hydroxylate, reduce, and sulfurylate the steroids originating from the placental synthesis. More than 40 years later, this theory was confirmed and consolidated, and all the enzymes responsible for these synthetic pathways and for their distribution within the two different fetal placental compartments have been isolated. The title of one of our papers says, "The placental barrier to androgens and this mechanism of protection of the female fetus from the biological negative effects of the maternal androgens and corticosteroids is well represented in this slide." This mechanism applies after the 12th week of pregnancy, when the placental structure and function has been completed, and this is the period of pregnancy when the group of Stockholm investigated the aromatization process by the placenta. But what happens before? Recently, it has been found that this protection is even more consistent in the period between the 8th and the 12th week of gestation, when the fetal adrenal produces a peak of cortisol, which is responsive to adrenocorticotropic hormone, and this peak protects the genital development in female fetus by keeping the dihydroepiandrosterone sulfate production at a relatively low level. After the 10th week, the cortisol begins to decrease because the expression of the enzyme 3-beta-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase gradually decreases, reducing the suppression of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And the secretion of the hydroepiandrosterone sulfate gradually increases. And this is what we found after the 12th week of gestation during our experimental conditions in the fetal adrenals. Fetal adrenals is a very large, active, and indispensable organ, which will disappear shortly after birth, together with the great amount of steroid precursors to the placental aromatase that will contribute to the production of estrogens in pregnancy. It produces quite a number of delta-5 steroids and many other compounds, all of them regulated by the placental CRF. The biological effect of these compounds, besides the contribution with endocrine and paracrine effects to the dialogue between mother and fetus, will produce a sort of a cascade effect on the mechanism activating the uterine contractions. This culminates to the start-up of the labor at the end of pregnancy. This cartoon summarizes in a very schematic way the different steps from the fetal adrenal to the placenta, the amnion, the decidua, and finally the myometrium, to show what is known today on the activation and the maintenance of the uterine contraction until delivery. An interesting aspect of the enzymes involved in the synthesis of the corticosteroids is the clinical application of some inhibitors of the enzymatic activities. This example shows how the specific 3-beta-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase type 1 inhibitors can help control the timing of labor without compromising the steroidogenesis in the adrenal glands. There is another clinical observation in a long-term exposure to the action of glucocorticoids, either because of maternal exposure to chronic stress or because of a congenital low production of type 2 isoform of 11 beta-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase, or because of mutations in the gene that encodes the same enzyme. And this is the occurrence of a low birth weight of the fetus and the occurrence also of hypertension and metabolic diseases when he or she will be adult. The work of Barker and this group in Cambridge demonstrated that the placental morphology of at birth enables us to predict in the newborn the occurrence of hypertension and metabolic diseases in his adult life when the vascularity of the organ is severely damaged. And the identification of the human genome, the epigenetic mechanism of the genomic imprinting, and the monoallelic genes responsible of the allocation of the nutrient resources available to the fetus from the maternal organism became more clear. The unbalanced placental expression of these genes will produce not only the intrauterine growth restriction, but also the exposure to a number of pathological conditions of the subject in his adult life. Shortly, this kind of genetic test with the microarray technique will be easily accessible to a routine analysis. And again, here I borrow this picture from Professor Diczfalusy archives to show how the Egyptians, around 5,000 years ago, knew that each human being before his birth is programmed in his genetic code for the future quality and for the length of his life, since the divinity has already defined it during his or her prenatal shaping. Upon my return home from Stockholm, the knowledge of the endocrine pattern of the fetoplacental unit was applied to the clinic in order to explore the intrauterine fetal conditions with the use of ultrasounds. This includes the cardiotocography with a prolonged observation of fetal heart rate and the uterine contractility, and the fetal movements by a prolonged observation by means of ultrasound scanning. It was clear, and fetal movements by prolonged observation by means of ultrasound scanning. It was clear that the simultaneous observation of these two or more biophysical parameters could provide a greater accuracy in identifying the fetal distress or even severe damage of the fetus. The simultaneous recording of the fetal heart rate with a series of fetal movements demonstrate that in the third trimester of pregnancy, the fetus presents at least two behavioral states of activity and quiet, similar to those present in the infant, and they can easily be recognized in this slide. Besides the ultradian cycles, also the circadian rhythms of gross fetal body movement, fetal breathing movement, and high variability of fetal heart rate have been shown. The levels of the maternal plasma cortisol are strictly related to the alternation of the fetal behavioral states. The computerized analysis of the fetal behavior is a quite accurate indicator of the fetal well-being when the sequence of the activity and quiet states maintain their rhythmic and their regular sequence. The loss of this circadian rhythm is expression of an initial fetal discomfort and may predict the occurrence of the fetal distress few days in advance. Also, the sequence of the maternal fetal sleep-awake is a sort of a switch-on-off mechanism regulated by the fetomaternal corticosteroids and the neurosteroids. And also the observation of these rhythms can be an index of fetal well-being. Doesn't move? Okay. The mother and his conceptus communicate very intensively. From the very beginning of their intrauterine relationship, and the extraembryonic matrix first and the placenta later represent a kind of a mailbox collecting messages and needs from both directions in order to maintain a perfect cohabitation until delivery and even after. Next, please. The instruments of communications are cytokines, neuropeptides, proteins, steroids, growth factor, prostaglandins, etc., traveling to short and long distance to find their receptorial targets and produce their biological effects. But the fetal maternal, next please, but the fetal maternal linkage is not confined to a continuous transfer of these compounds. Recently, it has been demonstrated that a very consistent cellular traffic can be found in both directions. Yes. Especially from the fetus to the mother, it consists in a passage of trophoblastic, lymphoid, erythroid, and hematopoietic stem cells. Next, please. Diana Bianchi described not only this traffic, but also the ability of the fetal stem cells to differentiate into different organs and tissues of the mother. For example, in a thyroid goiter removed at the second trimester of pregnancy, almost 50% of the thyroid follicles derived from the fetal hematopoietic stem cells. Next. Several other observations demonstrate the plasticity of the fetal stem cells and their attitude to repair lesions occurring in the maternal organs. And since the fetal stem cells implant themselves in a maternal organism to form a true microchimerism persisting for the rest of the maternal life, this process of protection to the mother by the fetus persists long time after delivery, as demonstrated by Bianchi. Recently, the sources of stem cells have been identified in the amnion and in the amniotic fluid and in the Wharton jelly. They have the characteristics of the mesenchymal stem cells, capable of generating dopaminergic neurons besides bone and muscular tissue. Some of them exhibit the markers characteristic of the embryonic stem cells. Although in some cases this maternal microchimerism has been found associated with some autoimmune disease, such as systemic sclerosis, polymorphic eruption of pregnancy, systemic lupus erythematosus, and Hashimoto disease, the advantage collecting and cryopreserving and banking them are by far so great because of their quantity, plasticity, and versatility in the repopulation of the bone marrow and in the differentiation into a number of cell types. The number of cord blood banks have recently multiplied. Numerous in Europe and in my country have been established. The great advantage of the cord blood stem cell transplantation in numerous pathological conditions, in blood and solid tumors, and in the aplastic anemia are summarized in this slide. The in vitro expansion has been also obtained with the different techniques, as the number of cells in a single cord blood collection is rather exiguous for the transplantation to an adult subject. Examples of the plasticity of the cord blood stem cells are shown in these two slides, where also in our experience, these cells have differentiated into cells exhibiting the markers of the osseous and muscular tissue. Another characteristic of the stem cells is the possibility to be employed as vectors of genetic information to replace defective and mutated genes in prenatal stem cell transfusion, as has already been carried out in cases of congenital immunodeficient syndrome and as it is programmed in the thalassemic fetuses. The human being possesses an inborn attitude to solidarize, to solidarity, to express sympathy toward the others who need help and of humanitarian support. This attitude is present during our fetal life, but which unfortunately we lose progressively as we become adult. Our great hope is that we can recover this noble feeling towards others, not only individually, but at the governmental level. Those that have been privileged by natural and economical resources to provide the support to the poor and less fortunate countries. In order to achieve this goal, it is necessary that man re-evaluates the real meaning of the friendship. Friendship is the highest expression of human solidarity and the true feeling of reciprocal gratification. Nothing is more precious than a solid and sincere friendship between men. Good friends enjoy family life and share joys and sadness, plan projects of common interest, and enjoy a theater performance, especially when presented in a classical frame, such as in the Syracuse Amphitheater, or at the Opera House in the Otello. My presentation is filled up with those wonderful memories, both scientific and sentimental. My great hope is to see in the future more scientific accomplishments and a softer attitude of men toward each other. Unfortunately, I am afraid I am too old to live this kind of El Dorado epoch. Thank you very much.
Dear Presidium, dear guest, after this wonderful presentation, we have come to the point, to one of the most outstanding moments, when I would like to ask Mr. Egon Diczfalusy to come here and to present the Diczfalusy medals to the awardees. Thank you very much.
Carissimo Ninni, uno dei miei patri intellettuali, Rabindranath Tagore, dice che dormivo e sognato che la vita non è che gioia. Mi svegliai e vedi che la vita non è più di servizio. Servivo e comprendi che nel servire è la gioia. In real Hungarian, Swedish, English, the best I can produce with a broad accent, it says that I slept and I dreamt that life is only a pleasure. Then I awakened and found out that life is only service. I served and I understood that in serving is the pleasure. And you have certainly done this, and thousands of your patients may witness that this service was really extremely effective to many thousands of mothers. Now, if I may back 400 years, this was the year when François de Sales became the Bishop of Geneva. And he wrote in one of his books that le bruit ne fait pas de bien, Le bien ne fait pas de bruit. Again, in English, the noise doesn't make any good, and making noise and making good, doing good, doesn't make any noise. And Nini was doing all the good in silence. And again, there are many patients who could tell us. And then, if we go back a little bit more, you showed Sophocles at 2400 prior to Christ, and Sophocles says that hope is the main factor maintaining the majority of mankind. And you have had an incredible ability to instigate hope, not only in the family, but to students, to friends, and I think all of us appreciated what you have done as a modern psychotherapist. And finally, Nini, this year, like many years before, you generously invited me to Syracuse, which is a very soft spot in my heart. And in Syracuse, we have seen this year Euripides, and it was Heracles. And in the very last part of the drama, in the very last reply, Heracles says that è uno stolto chi pensa che potere e ricchezza valgono più che un amico sincero. Who thinks that wealth and power are more worth than a devoted friend is thinking amiss. And you have been a devoted friend in 40 years' time. And I suppose, I was not told, but this is, I suppose it is a special pleasure for me to give it to you now. And I hope that your new career now just began. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to ask Professor Britt Maria Landgren from Karolinska Institute to give her speech.
It's a little bit complicated with this coat since it was mainly made for men, so it's a little bit too big for me, but I'll manage. As the representative of the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Professor Egon Diczfalusy's home university, I hope, I would like to express the congratulations of the achievements of the foundation and also gratitudes of the Institute for the work of Professor Diczfalusy during 30 years, which has contributed a lot to the Institute. I also want to stress and express the gratitudes for all the work of Mrs. Ann Diczfalusy, which was very important to all the PhD students of the lab, which I was one in the early 70s, who got a lot of help and support writing our first papers from Mrs. Diczfalusy, not the least helping us with our bad English, both with presentations and writing papers. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to ask Professor György Bártfai Vice President of the Foundation of Szeged, to give his speech now. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, it is a very pleasant task for me to briefly introduce the Diczfalusy Prize to you. According to the statutes of the Foundation, this prize will be given annually to an internationally acknowledged investigator younger than 40 years for his or her achievements in improving reproductive health. The initial idea was to present a diploma of honor, but earlier this year, when Professor Diczfalusy paid one of his many visits to Szeged, he became fascinated by a sculpture situated close to the votive church Hungarian Pieta 1956, which was created by Klára Tóbiás, a well-known artist of Szeged. He was so much impressed by the beauty of the sculpture that he decided to change the original idea of presenting a diploma and to ask the artist to prepare a miniature version about 30 centimeters large of the original artwork. The excellence and unique artistic quality of this artwork has been commented upon by many experts and art critics, and the statue rapidly became a highly appreciated art treasure of the citizens of Szeged. I would like to warmly recommend it to our guests to visit the Dome Square to see the sculpture which was created for the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Hungarian Revolution of 1956, one of the most important events in Hungarian as well as world history on the 20th century. This sculpture is placed in front of the building of the Hungarian Academy of Science, right behind the votive church. Let me now introduce the artist. Klára Tóbiás, whose parents were also artists, was born in Szeged, worked in Szeged, and is still an outstanding person in the city's vibrant cultural life in many years. Her first exhibition was opened in 1981. Her artwork is well recognized, and several of her sculptures are exhibited in Szeged and throughout the country. Finally, let me present as a perfect example of her art 3 sculptures of Klára Tóbiás. What you can see is situated on the Plaza Square. This is the Lion's Wheel. Next. And 2 others, the portrait of Andor Zsótér, also situated on the Plaza Square, and the other sculpture is our first king, Saint Stephen. According to the intention of the founder and the trustee of the foundation, a carefully selected young investigator will be awarded yearly this artwork, hoping that it will remind them during many years to come of the Diczfalusys, of this foundation and its effort to contribute to the improvement of human reproductive health, but also of this university and of the host city of Szeged, and last but not least, of the host country, Hungary, as well. There is one picture before. Okay. So, Now you can see the miniature sculpture on the table, and I thank you for your attention.
The next task of ours is the laudatio of the first prize winner, Professor Maria Katona, board member of the foundation, Szeged, Hungary.
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to introduce you Dr. Maria Natalia Cruz, who is the first prize winner of the Egon and Ann Diczfalusy Foundation. The Egon and Ann Diczfalusy Foundation has been established for the support of scientific work in the field of reproductive health for scientists under the age of 40. This year, the Diczfalusy Award and Medal will be awarded for the first time. By the special request of the founder, Professor Egon Diczfalusy, the award will be given to Maria Natalia Cruz, who is a medical doctor. Maria Natalia Cruz obtained her medical degree at the National University of Rosario, Argentina in 1997. She specialized in obstetric and gynecology at the Alvarez Hospital in Buenos Aires, where she received her specialist degree in obstetric and gynecology in 2001. Later, she worked at the Caseros Clinic in Buenos Aires until 2002. Dr. Cruz entered the PhD program of the Karolinska Institute at the Karolinska University Hospital, Uddinge, Stockholm in 2003. She studied the role of estrogen and estrogen receptor subtypes in vasodilatory responses induced by estrogenic compounds. She conducted animal experiments and studies in human subjects to investigate the tissue expression of estrogen receptor subtypes and the estrogen-induced vascular responses under physiological and pathological conditions. Dr. Cruz and her co-workers demonstrated the importance of estrogen receptors for vascular health. They concluded that administration of estrogenic compounds that selectively bind to specific estrogen receptor subtypes might be an important option for prevention and treatment of cardiovascular diseases. Pharmacological and/or diet supplementation with estrogenic compounds, including phytoestrogens, may provide cardiovascular benefit for women with cardiovascular disease. She published several papers in leading scientific journals, such as the American Journal of Physiology and Atherosclerosis. Dr. Cruz summarized her research work in her PhD thesis entitled Gender-Related Small Artery Function, Implication for Estrogenic Compounds. She obtained her PhD degree at the Karolinska Institute in 2006. Dr. Cruz worked as a visiting researcher in various departments in London, Santiago, and Buenos Aires. She was awarded with the Pfizer Stipend in 2004 and with the Hjärt-Lungfonden Stipend in 2003, 2004, and 2005. At present, she holds a postdoctoral position at the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Karolinska University Hospital, Uddinge, Stockholm. Dr. Maria Natalia Cruz is married and she is the mother of 2 children.
So now I would like to ask Maria Natalia Cruz to come over here and to have a short presentation about gender differences in estrogen receptor patterns of small arteries. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure for me to be here today, and thank you very much for this invitation. I'm going to talk shortly about gender difference in estrogen receptor patterns of small arteries. I would like to highlight 4 points: endothelium as a target for estrogen action, estrogen receptor and estrogen receptor ligands, coronary heart disease, and gender. The endothelium is the largest endocrine organ. It is a barrier function between blood and tissue. It regulates vascular tone, cell growth, homeostasis, among others. And here it is a schema of the vascular tree And I'm going to concentrate my talk in the resistance-sized arteries, arteries who are between 100 and 400 microns in internal diameter. And they are a major effector organ of the cardiovascular system because they are responsible for the peripheral resistance, blood pressure, blood flow to target organs, and they are related to the prevention of coronary heart disease, as well as their relevance for investigation since it's known that there is a correlation between small resistance artery function and microcoronary circulation, as well as with hypertension. This is the way as we obtain the resistance arteries from a fat biopsy taken from abdominal. They are abdominal. This is abdominal fat biopsy where we dissect the artery, as we can see, the vein, the bigger one, and the artery. From these biopsies, these arteries are selected and studied. If we open this artery longitudinally, we can see with an scanning electron microscopy picture endothelial cells, vascular smooth muscle cells, and connective tissue by means of collagen and elastin. These arteries are a target for estrogen action. It is known that in the endothelium, estrogen enhances proliferation, enhances release of endothelial-derived relaxing factors, decrease release of endothelial-derived constrictive factors, and increase flow response. In vascular smooth muscle cells, estrogens decrease proliferation and increase relaxation, as well as other effects as being antioxidants, improving lipid profile, diminishing platelet adhesion, and vascular collagen. How can we study these arteries? Functional studies can be done with a pressure myograph technique. We can see an artery between two cannulas, and with this method, the importance of this method is that we can measure flow, and flow, it is the most physiological stimulus for arterial dilatation. So with this ex vivo experiment, we can see what happened in vivo. The other method is called biomyograph, where we can see the artery between two wires, and this is important because we can have several preparations at the same time, and we can make pharmacological studies. Nowadays, we know that there is a controversy when we talk about estrogen replacement therapy, especially in aging population and in women with coronary heart disease. So one of the hypotheses that we are talking about is the impact that the estrogen receptors may have. In 1996, the second estrogen receptor was discovered. It's called estrogen receptor beta. Both estrogen receptors have similar affinity for 17-beta estradiol. ER alpha is more important in breast and uterus, and ER beta and in human vascular smooth muscle cells. Estrogen action is mediated by this estrogen receptor, and estrogen receptor can act in a genomic pathway and in a non-genomic acute pathway, since it has been known that it has been discovered that both estrogen receptor alpha and beta co-localize in the caveola of the plasma membrane, what allows estrogen to have an acute action in minutes. To study the selectivity of to study estrogen receptors, nowadays we are lack of estrogen receptors subtypes antagonists. So we can work with mice where an estrogen receptor had been knocked out. This work were done with beta estrogen receptor knockout mice. And another option is to use estrogen receptor selective agonists as phytoestrogens that comes from soya, for instance, genisdein, and resveratrol that can mainly find in red wine and peanuts, And these phytoestrogens are more selected to beta estrogen receptor. In order to compare, another work was done with PPT, which is an ER-alpha receptor ligand. And in order to compare the selectivity, we use also 17-beta estradiol that binds to both estrogen receptors at the same time. This is a graphic as we can see how flow dilates arteries, resistance mesenteric arteries from female mice after and before 3 hours incubation with 17-beta estradiol. And we can clearly see that after incubation with 17-beta estradiol, the relaxation is much better. So what happened if we applied the same experiment in Verco mice, in mice without the ER-beta? In female mice, the results were exactly the same, as we can see in the first graph, in the second graph. Beta in the Verco female, the relaxation was also enhanced with the 17-beta estradiol, even if the artery is beta knockout. And if we incubate with PPT, which is an alpha estrogen receptor agonist, the response was the same. So we can say that in female arteries, the ER-alpha is more important than the ER-beta. Can we extrapolate data from mice to women? We recruited a group of women, similar characteristics, but one group has a previous myocardial infarction. And we performed a subcutaneous fat biopsy. These arteries were opened and were stained for ER-beta and ER-alpha. And the intensity of expression of ER-beta was more important in the coronary heart disease group, while the ER-alpha was more expressed in control women. Can we relate this with the function? Women with coronary heart disease versus control, we can see here the graph where genistein and resveratrol, both phytoestrogens, were acutely applied to the arteries. And in comparison between control and coronary heart disease, phytoestrogen relax better arteries from women with coronary heart disease. And if we compare in the same group women with coronary heart disease, both phytoestrogens applied better relaxation than 17-beta estradiol. Just to remember that phytoestrogens, genistein and resveratrol, binds more to beta than alpha. Just the opposite result is found in control women. Only PPT, the alpha agonist, applied a better relaxation than 17-beta estradiol. And from the gender perspective, it is known that there is an association between estrogen receptors and coronary heart disease in men. And the similar experiments were done in male mice, and the flow-mediated relaxation in mesenteric arteries were enhanced after incubation with 17-beta estradiol. This is a wild-type mice, a mice with both estrogen receptors. But what happened in the Merco mice, in a mice that doesn't have beta estrogen receptors, the vasorelaxation was not improved. And similar results happen if we incubate these arteries with PPT alpha agonists. So from the gender's perspective, in the male mice, the ER-beta seems to be more important. In order to correlate these results with the population, we recruited a man group, control and coronary heart disease, with the previous myocardial infarction, similar characteristics. And the intensity of expression of the estrogen receptors was no different between the groups. But what happened when we applied phytoestrogens and another estrogen ligands? In the coronary heart disease and in the control group, both estrogen receptor ligands, substance that binds more to one estrogen receptor, relax better the arteries than 17-beta estradiol. So we can conclude that phytoestrogens ex vivo can evoke acute dilatation of arteries from women and men, with and without coronary heart disease, at concentrations attainable in vivo, with moderate red wine consumption and or consumption of soy-derived products in the daily diet. I forgot to say that the concentration that we applied in the experiments is compatible with the concentration that a person can have in plasma after eating a plate of soya or drinking a glass of red wine. And as a conclusion, women live 1/3 of their lives after the menopause with an increase of coronary heart disease. And men can have an estrogenic cardiovascular benefits. This implies that we need a better understanding of how these estrogen receptor ligands achieve vascular effects in order to design pharmacological agents able to reproduce estrogenic effect in target tissues without adverse effects elsewhere. Thank you very much.
Dear Presidium, dear guest, we have come to the final action before the intermission. So I would like to ask again Mr. Egon Diczfalusy to give the prize, the Diczfalusy prize, to the prize winner. Thank you.
Querida Natalia, para mí es un placer enorme poder darte, presentar este premio. Pero he prometido a los amigos de decir al menos unas palabras en sueco y después en inglés, y todo eso en menos de 4 minutos. I promised to say a few words in Swedish and then in my so-called English, and all this in less than 4 minutes. So please take the time. Den väldigt privilegierade, både du och jag, för att vi har 2 fosterländer, andra har inga. Och i det andra fosterlandet har vi lärt oss vad forskning är. Och den svenska definitionen är att forskning är det lidelsefulla sökandet efter den lidelsefria sanningen. So I said that both of us are very privileged because many people have no country nowadays and we have 2. And our second country is Sweden, which has taught us something, and that is to appreciate really research. Because the Swedish definition is that research is the passionate search of the passion-free truth. And the next question is, what is truth? And my dear American poet Walt Whitman, he says, whatever satisfies the soul is truth. And I think this is the main problem with our present society, because for millions and millions of people, religious dogma, fanaticism, and other strong feelings satisfy the soul, and they think it is the truth. Our truth is different, and it is research. And the best I can tell you, looking back on my long life, is that it is a good life. So it is like a long road. Sophocles says that it is a long road, knows no return. And it is a road where traveling itself is much more important than arriving. And the pleasure is in the traveling, in finding new vistas, in enlarging the perimeter between the known and the unknown, so that you see, finally, you understand that now we know enough to understand how much more we have to learn. And I hope, and that will be my highest prize, that you will implant this into your students in the future. And I wish you a very long and very pleasant travel.